Hidden beneath the streets of Edinburgh, sealed in darkness for over a century, is a place still echoing with voices no one can explain. This is the true story of the underground vaults, where centuries of poverty, crime, and darkness may have left something behind. Our story begins in 1788 with the construction of the South Bridge in Edinburgh, Scotland. As part of this ambitious project, 19 massive arches were built, and within them, a network of chambers was created. These were the South Bridge vaults. At first, their purpose was entirely practical. They were designed to house taverns, workshops for cobblers, and storage spaces for merchants. Imagine a bustling subterranean marketplace, lit by torchlight, filled with the sounds of commerce. For a short time, the vaults served the city well. Tradesmen worked, goods were sold, and the chambers were just another part of a thriving city. There was nothing sinister about them yet. They were simply stone rooms, built for a purpose. But the foundation of their future darkness was laid in their very construction. The problem started with the build quality. The vaults were constructed without proper waterproofing. Soon after they opened, water began to seep through the porous stone of the bridge above. The chambers grew damp, cold, and unwelcoming. The air became stagnant, with almost no circulation. The constant dampness ruined merchandise, rusted tools, and made the workshops unbearable. One by one, the legitimate businesses and tradesmen packed up and left. They abandoned the dark, wet chambers, seeking sunlight and dry air back on the surface. As the merchants moved out, the light went with them. The vaults were plunged into darkness, their original purpose forgotten, left to the damp and the silence. But they would not remain empty for long. As the 18th century drew to a close, Edinburgh's poorest and most desperate citizens started to move in. The abandoned vaults became a hidden slum, a last resort for those with nowhere else to go. Homeless families, criminals on the run, and the operators of illegal businesses all found a home in the perpetual twilight beneath the city. The conditions were beyond imaginable. There was no sunlight, no sanitation, and no clean water. Entire families lived in single windowless chambers, shrouded in darkness and filth. The lack of ventilation meant the air was thick with the smoke from their fires and the stench of sickness. Diseases like cholera and typhoid spread like wildfire through the cramped, unsanitary spaces. Life in the vaults was brutal and often short. Violence was a constant companion. The vaults became a lawless underworld, hidden from the eyes of the city watch. Smuggling operations thrived, with illicit goods moved through the dark corridors. Illegal gambling dens operated in the shadows, often ending in brawls and bloodshed. Darker rumors also began to circulate. This led to the infamous practice of body snatching. Whispers suggested that the vaults were connected to this grisly trade, a place where stolen bodies could be stored before being sold to the anatomy schools. People spoke of murders committed in the darkness, their victims' bodies hidden within the labyrinthine chambers, never to be found. The vaults developed a fearsome reputation, a place of danger and despair that respectable people avoided at all costs, especially after nightfall. By the mid-1800s, the situation had become untenable. The city authorities eventually took action, clearing many of the inhabitants from the vaults. The entrances were sealed with rubble and earth, and the subterranean world was largely forgotten. For over a century, the chambers lay dormant, untouched and hidden beneath the bustling streets. Time passed, generations came and went, and the memory of the underground slum faded. The darkness and the suffering that had soaked into the very stones were left to fester in silence. The city built itself up, layer by layer, burying its dark secret even deeper. Then, in the 1980s, the secret was uncovered. A former rugby player exploring the area stumbled upon a way into the forgotten chambers. This rediscovery sparked a major excavation. As workers cleared away decades of rubble, the past came flooding back. They found the remains of the old rooms, filled with oyster shells, broken bottles, and the discarded remnants of daily life. Once cleared, the vaults were deemed historically significant, and plans were made to open them to the public. But as people began to venture back into the darkness, they discovered that the vaults hadn't been entirely empty. Something else had been waiting. Almost immediately, strange reports began to surface. Tour guides, construction workers, and the very first visitors started sharing unsettling experiences. They would hear faint whispers in rooms that were completely empty. The sound of children's laughter would echo down a corridor with no one there. Sudden, inexplicable drops in temperature would leave people shivering in specific spots, their breath turning to mist. A heavy, oppressive feeling of being watched became a common complaint, especially in the tighter passages. It seemed to hold a presence. As more people explored the vaults, the reports grew more intense and more physical. The phenomena were no longer just sounds and feelings. People began seeing things. Shadowy figures were reported moving along the stone walls, darting out of sight the moment they were noticed. These weren't just tricks of the light. They were described as solid, man-shaped silhouettes moving with purpose in the gloom. Then came the physical sensations. Visitors would report feeling an unseen hand on their back, as if being pushed forward. Others felt a cold touch on their arms or the back of their neck. A recurring story was the feeling of a small hand tugging at their own, as if a child were trying to get their attention. Certain chambers developed reputations for this activity. One room, in particular, became known for a malevolent presence that caused sudden, overwhelming fear in those who entered. The sheer volume of these accounts led to paranormal investigations. Ghost hunting teams from around the world descended into the vaults, armed with cameras and audio recorders. The evidence they claimed to capture was startling. They recorded numerous electronic voice phenomena, or EVPs, disembodied voices, captured on audio that were not audible at the time. Words like "go," "get out," and even names were reportedly caught in the silent chambers. Investigators frequently experienced equipment malfunctions, with fresh batteries draining in an instant and cameras shutting down without reason, often in the most active areas. Perhaps most compelling was the consistency of the experiences. Time and time again, independent visitors would report the exact same phenomena in the exact same rooms, without any prior knowledge of the vault's reputation. Of course, skeptics offer logical explanations. The complete darkness and confined spaces can easily disorient the mind and heighten the senses. The unique acoustics of the stone arches could create auditory illusions, distorting distant sounds and making them seem like nearby whispers. And the power of psychological suggestion is strong. When you go on a ghost tour, you expect to experience something spooky. Yet the reports persist. The sheer number and consistency of the accounts, from sober-minded workers to terrified tourists, are difficult to dismiss entirely. The feeling of being touched, the clear EVPs, the sightings of a shadowy figure known as the Watcher, these things continue to defy simple explanation. Today, the South Bridge Vaults are one of Edinburgh's most unsettling tourist attractions. Every day, visitors descend the stone steps, leaving the modern city behind and entering a world preserved in darkness. The air is still cold, the ground is still uneven, and the silence is still heavy, and the stories continue. People on tours still hear footsteps echoing behind them when their group is standing still. They still feel the cold brush of unseen fingers against their skin. They still sense that they are not alone, that something is moving just at the edge of their vision, watching from the deepest shadows, built for commerce, abandoned to squalor, filled with the echoes of a century of suffering. The Edinburgh vaults remain beneath the city, a place where the past feels disturbingly present. And deep underground, where the light never reaches, many visitors will tell you the same thing. You are never truly alone. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this journey into the dark, be sure to follow for more true horror stories from the world's most haunted places.